Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In the year 2063, humans' mistreatment of the planet drastically raised sea levels to an unprecedented point, submerging most of the Earth underwater. Only 2 continents remain on the planet, and currently, they are fighting for territory and resources. In the middle of the sea, between both continents, there is a military outpost known as the Sentinel, guarded by 4 soldiers who are beginning to get frustrated. Their contract ended 3 months ago after 2 years of service, but the replacement crew has not shown up to pick them up yet. Food and water are becoming scarce, so during a stormy night, Cassidy and Sullivan decide to go fishing. Surprisingly, they have a good catch and fill their large net with plenty of fish. Meanwhile, their superior officer, Hendricks, realizes the storm is becoming too violent, so he asks Baines to secure the safety of the giant explosive they protect at the Sentinel. At that moment, the waves start growing large and violent, affecting the fort's pipelines. Baines rushes to fix them but gets his hand stuck, struggling underwater for several minutes before finally freeing himself. Outside, the waves carry the net away, and the duo loses their catch. Sullivan tries to catch something again, but the wind becomes too strong and dangerous, so he has to run back inside before he is swept away as well. Everyone returns in time before a huge wave hits the structure, shaking it and pushing water through all the entrances, but the Sentinel is still standing when it all ends. The next morning, the group discusses how to reduce their resource consumption while eating military rations for breakfast. Baines asks what happened to the fish and gets angry when he learns they were lost, leading to an argument with Sullivan, who insults Baines for taking parts from his kitchen to repair the main pipelines. A dispute ensues, and Hendricks reminds them to act like adults and focus on repairs. Baines wonders why they don't ask the replacement crew to hurry up, but Hendricks reminds him that the telegraph is for reporting only. Later, Sullivan uses the telegraph to make the daily report. He informs the base that there was no event, and they respond that there was no event there either, the same as the past few months. Sometime later, Sullivan joins Hendricks outside and, after making some jokes about his dancing airman figurine, Sullivan looks through binoculars at the sea. He is surprised to discover a ship approaching, which Cassidy confirms when she checks the radar. Sullivan is thrilled, thinking it's the replacement crew, but Hendricks is cautious and orders Baines to get some weapons in case it's an enemy. Cassidy tries to contact the ship but receives no response, so Hendricks decides to give the ship a chance. He hands Sullivan a weapon and tells him to go by boat to meet the ship and make sure there are no enemies to worry about. Sullivan immediately sets off and approaches the ship, calling out for any possible passengers there, but there is still no response. With the gun in hand, Sullivan boards the ship and begins investigating, growing increasingly worried as he notices signs of no one being there. Objects are covered in dirt, the radio isn't working, and there is untouched food in the cabinets. Hendricks tries to contact him for a status update, but Sullivan ignores him as he discovers 4 bags meant for them. This was their relief, but something happened to the crew, and they vanished, losing their chance to return home. As Sullivan isn't responding, Hendricks assumes he was attacked, so he wants to shoot the ship before it gets close to the Sentinel. He asks Cassidy for one of the keys to the explosive, and when she hesitates, he reminds her that it's protocol. Along with his own key, Hendricks starts to activate the explosive and, before shooting, tries to contact Sullivan one last time. Fortunately, Sullivan responds this time, and the attack is called off. However, when Cassidy asks for her key back, Hendricks informs her that he's keeping both as punishment for her hesitation to follow orders. Later, Sullivan tows the ship to the Sentinel. While Hendricks investigates the ship, Sullivan reunites with Cassidy, and they spend some enjoyable moments to make up for the scare they just had. A few hours later, while taking a quick iodine bath, Baines informs the team of all the things he managed to retrieve from the ship. He is sure that it was their relief, and the engine hadn't worked for months. Sullivan wants to send a message to the base, but Hendricks forbids it until they gather more information, as none of this makes sense, even if it's considered an event. The team is getting tired and suspicious of Hendricks' behavior, especially when they realize he now has both keys. After the bath, Hendricks checks the ship's navigation history and notes all the coordinates, which he takes back to the Sentinel to plot them on a map to follow their journey. Meanwhile, Cassidy and Sullivan talk about what the world must be like outside, as they haven't seen it for 2 years. Sullivan admits he sent a message behind Hendricks' back, so they'll have a response tomorrow. The next morning, Hendricks finds his 3 soldiers waiting suspiciously next to the telegraph, and Baines confesses the truth. Hendricks intends to reprimand them for it, but at that moment, the machine receives a response. The group gets excited until they read what it says. It's exactly the same message Sullivan sent the night before. That's when they finally realize they lost contact with the base a long time ago, and the computer just sent back the no-event message that Sullivan sends every day. While Hendricks continues to work with the coordinates on the map, Baines begins to sneak into the ship with a plan in mind. One night, Sullivan catches him returning, but Baines refuses to explain. The duo ends up drinking together, and Baines shares some stories about the family waiting for him at home, if they still exist. Suddenly, Baines confesses that he thinks he can fix the ship. Excited about the hope of escaping, Sullivan rushes to share the news with Cassidy and asks her to leave with him and live together in one of the few safe cities left on the continent, but Cassidy is hesitant and can't believe what she's hearing. The next day, Sullivan sneaks into the ship with Baines to help him fix the engine, and together they manage to finish the job. As they step out, they find Hendricks waiting for them, ordering them to bring down the ship to use its parts to fix the Sentinel. He won't allow them to leave because he claims staying here is their duty, regardless of their contract ending. Sullivan refuses to die here, as happened to others in the past, and Baines agrees, but when Cassidy joins them, she doesn't show support. Not caring about their arguments, Hendricks sends the team to work on the repairs, threatening them with his gun if they don't obey. The guys are angry and scared that Hendricks has been too impulsive lately, so Cassidy offers to talk to him next. Cassidy tells Hendricks that she understands how he feels after losing his last team, but leaving is not the same as dying, if something is salvation. Meanwhile, Sullivan and Baines are beginning to wonder if they will have to fight their boss to get what they want. Their conversation is interrupted by Hendricks, who admits that Cassidy made a good argument. Since they have no communications, someone must report to the base. 2 people stay, and 2 others must go. Hendricks obviously stays, and Cassidy volunteered to stay here as well. Baines is happy with this development, but Sullivan is devastated. Shortly after, Sullivan talks with Cassidy privately, trying to convince her to come along, replacing Baines or disobeying Hendricks. He is so desperate to make her happy that he even offers to stay with her or stay here with her, but Cassidy explodes and tells him that she doesn't love him, she only considered him a human need. A devastated Sullivan runs out of the room, and Cassidy breaks down in tears. That night, Sullivan and Baines focus on packing. Hendricks gives Sullivan a letter to take to the base, and he comments that the enemy is just like them, soldiers who just want to protect their homes. Sullivan reminds Hendricks that they could all leave together, but Hendricks still refuses, saying that someone needs to keep an eye on the explosive. Then, Hendricks goes to finish his work on the map and coordinates, making a shocking discovery: the relief ship deliberately moved away from the Sentinel, which doesn't make sense. Suspicious, Hendricks rushes to check on Cassidy but doesn't dare say a word. The next morning, the team wakes up to the alarm ringing because another ship has appeared on the radar. The men hurry to their positions to defend the Sentinel, and Cassidy tries to contact the ship in vain. This time, Hendricks refuses to send anyone and orders the team to shoot, but the first bullet misses. As they prepare to reload, Cassidy realizes that the ship they had brought to the Sentinel is no longer there. At the same time, Sullivan and Baines finally get a clear view of it as the fog dissipates, and they are baffled by how the ship ended up there. They refuse to shoot again, but when Cassidy comes to warn them, it's too late. Hendricks threatens Baines and Sullivan with his gun to make them shoot. It is revealed here that it was Hendricks who put the ship back into the sea last night, and to prove he's serious, he shoots the air dancer. Baines still refuses to destroy the ship, and Hendricks responds by shooting his ear, so Sullivan grabs the cannon and destroys the ship before they lose a life. An angry Baines tries to go after Hendricks, but Cassidy knocks him out first with a fire extinguisher. Later, Sullivan and Cassidy lock Hendricks in the pantry and Cassidy takes both keys back. A furious Baines later tries to find Hendricks to kill him and ends up hitting Sullivan when he tries to stop him. Cassidy calms him down with words, but Baines still goes off to drink alone and undo his things, making him cry. At some point later, Cassidy mentions that Hendricks needs his iodine bath, but Baines refuses to let him out and announces that he's giving up. Sullivan tells Cassidy that they have no choice but to go through every channel on the telegraph until they find one that's working, and Cassidy takes the opportunity to confess that she hadn't said what she felt about him. She just wanted him to leave without worrying about her. but Sullivan hesitates to accept the apology. Later in the afternoon, Sullivan takes food to Hendricks and wonders why he changed his mind about leaving. Hendricks shares the information he obtained from the coordinates. The relief ship was here 3 months ago, as it should have been, but something made it drift away. This means there's a traitor among them who wants the explosive. Sullivan doesn't believe him and leaves, locking the door again. While Sullivan spends the rest of the day sending SOS messages through all the channels, Baines continues drinking and trying to occupy himself in his workshop, but soon loses his mind and destroys everything he built. Later, at night, Cassidy shares with Sullivan a photo of herself as a child with her family, explaining that they were killed by the enemy when she was still a child. The next morning, Baines finds Cassidy sleeping in the communications room. While he says nonsensical things about a lost future, he attacks Cassidy, making it seem like he wants to take advantage of her. After struggling for a while, Cassidy manages to push him away, not realizing that Baines stole the keys. Then Cassidy looks for Sullivan to tell him what happened, but at that moment, Baines's voice can be heard over the speakers announcing that he will activate the explosive. Sullivan and Cassidy rush back to the communications room and try to calm him down, mentioning his family as a reason to keep living. Baines cries as he steps away from the controls, but after Cassidy retrieves the keys, Baines admits that he forgot the last digit of the activation code. Sullivan thinks it's time to release Hendricks, but Baines has shocking news. He tried to kill him before, but when he entered the pantry, Hendricks was gone. An open window indicated that he had put an end to things for himself. When Cassidy and Sullivan check the pantry, they are devastated to see that Baines was telling the truth. Unable to deal with his grief, Sullivan reads the letter that Hendricks had written to the base, and he is shocked to see that Hendricks had requested an extension of his command. Later, Cassidy shows Sullivan the now-cleaned workshop to prove that Baines is feeling better and is building again. Baines confesses that his wife was pregnant and he never got to meet the baby, which makes Sullivan easily forgive him for the drunken outburst. Baines shows his gratitude with a hug before getting on the boat to go back to retrieve things from the sea. Cassidy goes with him, so Sullivan gives her a gun just as a precaution, and Cassidy thanks him with a kiss. Moments later, Sullivan decides to try fishing again, and when he pulls the net, he finds Hendricks' body with a head wound, meaning someone killed him, and there really is a traitor among them. As Sullivan rushes to check his friends' profiles for clues, Cassidy watches Baines on the boat, forming a plan. Then, Sullivan checks Hendricks' map, developing a theory. As a storm begins to form, Sullivan checks the lighthouse outside and confirms that it can be removed and moved. This means someone took the lighthouse on the boat and made the ship follow them instead of going to the Sentinel, explaining the coordinates. Then, this person killed the rescue team and left the ship adrift. A few hours later, only Cassidy returns from the short trip, saying that Baines fell accidentally and died while trying to get plastic. Sullivan immediately suspects that she killed him and that she was the traitor all along, but he's too scared to say anything yet. The next morning, Cassidy wakes up alone in bed. Sullivan speaks to her only through the walkie-talkie, explaining that he knows she killed everyone and that she's spying for the enemy, but he won't let her have the explosive. Cassidy then realizes that the keys are missing and rushes to the communications room, where she finds Sullivan in the middle of activating the explosive. As they have no future, he doesn't care to blow up the Sentinel with them still inside. With Sullivan holding her at gunpoint, Cassidy tries to explain that people in her homeland are suffering and that she hated lying to him, but Sullivan doesn't believe her and activates the explosive. However, instead of blowing up, the machine displays a funny phrase that Baines used to repeat, which makes them realize that Baines reprogrammed the explosive so that no one can use it for destruction. In the end, Sullivan and Cassidy have a small conversation. They agree that no matter which side of the war it comes from, they will protect the Sentinel together and keep surviving.